What's up, guys? Team Stamp West, Discraft Underground Team Captain, and we're back. We're going to do some off-season videos and interviews for you guys. First things first, be sure and give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you are not subscribed. And today we are going to be talking about sponsorship statuses. So if you guys don't know, Ultiworld has a series of articles keeping track of sponsorships and contract extensions as they become public information. So we are going to kind of look back at those posts, see whose contracts are up this year, and then talk about some big extensions that were recently announced in the very early offseason here. So Alex, let's kick it off.
Yeah, so there's a number of things that happened 2 years ago now, in 2018 going into the 2019 season. But these names, I'm just gonna list off a number of them, and we can kind of talk about them. All of the names we're talking about here at the beginning are contract open in 2020. So in 2020, right now, they're quote unquote out of contract. So people like Paige Shue, AJ Risley, Michael Johansson are three of the names that kind of popped up at the beginning. I think Paige Shue of that trio is the most interesting. Obviously, world champ, but she's also kind of the golden girl over at DD right now.
Yeah, I know that she had just recently moved and is working at that new shop. I follow her on social medias. But the one-time world champion, it's interesting to kind of see her in a contract year. You would maybe think that DD would kind of really try and lock her in. I mean, the 2020 season was pretty weird with COVID and with tournaments and everything, but she seems like somebody that they would want to keep around, and she's got family ties at DD too. So, I don't really see Paige going anywhere. I think that she'll probably, sign a 1 or maybe 2-year extension possibly, and stick with her DD roots.
Oh yeah, totally. I think of those three, the one that kind of strikes me as the most interesting right now is AJ Risley. I think AJ is in a really interesting spot in his career, coming off honestly a terrible injury, and all the best to him and his. But it'll be interesting to see if AJ kind of tries to run it back pretty much with DD. But I mean, and then Michael Johansson, he's historic figure in the Discraft community. So I think we can be pretty comfortable with him. I think this next name that we have on this list. What do you think about James Conrad being in a contract year?
Yeah, I think James Conrad is probably, looking at this list, one of, if not the biggest person who's in a contract year here. And there have been some rumors swirling around the internet on the Southeast Michigan page. There was some rumors that James was visiting the eastern part of the thumb there, a 3-letter company, and his van was spotted there by one of the members on the page, and they had posted a picture. So I think it's very interesting just to maybe have that evidence that James is looking around. Maybe he is looking for a little bit more than Innova is willing to offer him. He had a really great season. He's had a couple really great seasons, and I think James is he's definitely a top 10 player, and I think on a lot of courses, especially in the woods, he's a top 5 player for me almost every time. So I think he's in a really interesting spot, and I know Innova had announced some extensions that we'll get to, and he was not part of that. So I think that's the biggest, for me, that's one of the biggest kind of telling factors that maybe he's looking around, maybe he's seeing what his worth is out there, and maybe seeing who's interested. So
I think one of the things I saw in that same post was somebody mentioned that his van is still wrapped, but it was said early in the year in an interview, I don't remember who with, but James said that he's working on paying off that van. So the van is his, right? The van is his. The van isn't Innova's. So that wrap could be replaced by maybe some overmolds, right? But everything's rumor right now. So we're trying to figure out I think if that picture is any indication, maybe he was just there to visit friends. But if that picture is any indication, that's a pretty strong leader for who might pick up James.
Yeah, I think James is very serious about disc golf. I think that this is his career, and I think James has taken himself very seriously as a professional athlete. And we've really seen that over the last 2 years here, especially with Paul kind of releasing the details of his big deal. And so I think these guys are really starting to take themselves more seriously as professional athletes. Disc golf has been booming. There's a lot more money in disc golf. And so some of these top 5 guys, their value has really gone up pretty drastically as compared to 2 or 3 years ago when they were signing, what is now their old contracts.
Yeah, no, totally. So kind of moving a bit different direction. Nate Perkins is also out of contract in 2020. I think Nate's an interesting piece because he had a lot of press this year, right? So
Yep.
he may not have had the greatest year on the course, but off the course, spending all that time with Paige over in Southern California, he got a lot of airtime, and he has. I mean, when it comes to Discmania players, obviously Eagle's the golden child, but
Yeah.
when it comes to some of the media presence, he does really well on air, right? He's a really good voice in the box. So what are your thoughts on Nate as a potential change, or where he might go if he does go?
Yeah, I think it seems like Nate's pretty happy with Discmania. They have he has his disc there. He obviously loves the plastic, and I think Discmania has a really good, strong core of guys, and it seems like he's really in that discussion with those guys. He did have a little bit of a tough year, but like you said, he promotes really well. He represents really well. He brings a lot of value and social media to Discmania, and that seems to be something that they really value, obviously, with Simon and Eagle. So, it seems like he's happy there. I could see him possibly moving, but I would say it's pretty unlikely.
So if you were to put one, I'm going to put you on the spot on this one. If you were to put one company, what might be a company that he could switch to?
Man, that's a tough one. He's good friends with Paige. I think Discraft is kind of the obvious answer if he was going to switch to something. I don't know that if he'd be on the elite team and get a disc like he has now, and that's part of the reason I think Discmania is really still a good spot for him.
Yeah.
I could certainly see it happening,
Yeah.
and especially given that he tours with Paige and does a lot with her throughout the year, I could definitely see it happening, but I think it's unlikely.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think I think it'd be interesting to see if he maybe he hops over to DD. If he hops over to DD, he could be a little bit higher in their pecking order. Obviously,
that's
because
true.
Discmania has so much power behind their top guys. But
Yep.
we'll see. We'll see how that one pans out. So we're gonna run through 2 more that are pretty quick that are interesting. Is Leo Pirinen, who's Discmania, and then also Johnny McRae. I think Leo Pirinen is really interesting. He's a younger guy. He's over in Finland, I think.
Overseas, yep.
Yeah, so I think he would be an interesting person for somebody like Prodigy to pick up, because I'm pretty sure he's pretty good friends with Seppo as well. But
nice.
again,
Yep.
I don't know if that's going to happen. Discmania has a pretty strong hold over there. And
Yeah.
then Johnny at Lat 64, it's one of those. It's kind of a Dave Feldberg situation. He either can sign another contract or throw whatever he wants, right?
Yeah, I think he probably stays there as well. It seems like, he's done well there. The ageless wonder. Johnny's incredible, and it seems like he's been happy at Lat. I don't know, if he would go anywhere else. I could see him maybe moving within Trilogy, possibly the West Side or DD to add another DD name to their list. Kind of like you said, they could use a little bit more power. And Johnny does have a tendency to just put together really great tournaments. So
yeah.
I could definitely see that. So we'll move past Johnny.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off, we got a couple Discraft names to talk about. We got 4 Discraft names that we'll talk about next. So we got Brian Earhart, the Bearheart. We got Haley King, who's probably one of the most interesting names of anybody on this list. Andrew Presnell and Vanessa Van Dyken. So we'll kind of start with Brian. Brian loves the zone. Obviously his name's on there, and I think the zone is really a defining disc for his game, and I think Brian is versatile enough. He could probably throw whatever he wanted and have some success, but I think the zone is so pivotal to Brian's his game and his success, and he's such a good presence for Discraft with the podcasts and with the social media, and kind of like Nate Perkins, he didn't really have a great year, but he still brought a lot of value and brand representation to Discraft. So I'm certainly hoping that Brian stays. I can't really see him going somewhere else, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, no, I feel that. I think it's another case of like you said, he didn't have a great year. Maybe COVID messed him up. Maybe it was just a bad set of circumstances. But you're totally right. His presence on media, on social media, is so strong.
Yeah.
Um, if he re-signs with Discraft, it's positive. I think if he goes somewhere else, he could get like maybe a step higher, right? Or a step more that he might not have gotten at Discraft, which would be saying something considering he's on the elite team right now. But
Yeah.
again, I'll say it. I'll say it again. I think it might make sense for him to go DD. He does love throwing aces in Emporia, Kansas.
That's true. He does have some ace ties there. Uh, yeah, I'd be pretty surprised. I love
Oh yeah,
Ryan, and I would not that I have any power at all, but I
yeah.
would love for Brian to stay and continue representing Discraft.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it's definitely one of those things where I mean we were talking and it was interesting. Like when his name popped up, I was like, that's not even a name I considered to be going elsewhere. So it'll be
yeah,
interesting to see how the off season treats him. So
yeah,
onto the biggest fish to fry. Coming off a DGPT championship win,
yeah.
probably a breakout year in one of the weirdest years you could ever see it. Haley King is in a contract year. What do you think?
Uh, I think Haley King gets a big deal that she deserves. Is what I think. I think Discraft is the biggest company, and I'll throw in the caveat that we're both Discraft sponsored, so I know we're biased. But Discraft is really the biggest mover and shaker with Paul and Paige and Brody. And I think it's interesting that Haley is in a contract year and had such a great season. I think that brings a ton of value, and she's so young that it seems like the trajectory for her is just higher and higher every year that she goes on here. And I still don't think she's plateaued. I know that she had a phenomenal season, but I think that she still has more potential to her game and to her career than she even was able to achieve this year. So my guess is that Haley gets a really strong deal from Discraft. I would love to see Haley get 3 years, 4 years, something to really lock her in for the future, something that will support her and the trajectory of her career, so that she can have these good, just really disc golf focused off seasons and really um, continue to shine. And I think COVID kind of helped Haley because she had that long break, and every day she was posting putting videos, and we see her at the end of the year with the Circle Two putting title. So I think Haley gets a big deal. I would really be shocked if anything else happened other than that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those names where like it pops up in your eyes also kind of open because especially coming off this year, Haley King is the hottest commodity on it. I think the only
Yeah,
other name, and I'll bring him up into this conversation just because I see them as very similar characters, and that's Kyle Klein, right?
yeah,
Kyle and Haley, like honestly, when it comes to like value in the team right now or value in the sport right now, I'd put Haley above Kyle, but they're both right around that 18, 19, 20 years old. They're
yeah,
both like they both had some really good finishes. Obviously, Haley had the finish, right?
yeah.
But I think they're both kind of like somebody's got to pay these people. Somebody has to pay these kids because they're going to be it for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. While you're talking about Kyle, I see a similar situation for him. It seems like he's really happy with Discmania. They did a lot to make sure he got on the road this year and was able to stay on the road and stay comfortable. And it, it Discmania, I feel like is kind of a very like young centric team. They have a lot of young guys. We talked about Leo Purinen, and Nate Perkins is kind of still in that mix. But Kyle Klein, I think, is really the tip of the iceberg for this next generation, and I think Haley is that too. I think we're going to see a lot of uh, similar situations in the next couple of years, and I think that maybe makes these contracts more interesting if you're looking at 2, 3, 4 year deals, because I think there could be some talent coming up too that in the next year or two that might surprise us as well.
Oh, totally. And I think some of those names are going to get snatched up soon, and we don't even know if they are yet, right?
Yeah,
I know there are a few kids down in Indiana who are young, but they've got some talent. Let's go on to some more Discraft names. Presnell, he recently posted on the Discraft all day. I think, as we all know, he was selling jerseys. He was selling polos. What's going on, Wes?
I don't know, man. I don't know. He was selling some shirts. It's always interesting. You get to this time of year and you see some of these things that make you wonder. Seeing James's van somewhere, seeing a player selling some of their team shirts. Maybe he just wants some money for some new shirts.
That's what I'm hoping, right? That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah,
I love Prez, but you're right.
Yeah.
Like, there's no telling. I mean, we saw this same thing happen with Hokum last year or the year before. Whenever she moved to MVP, she just sold all of her Innova stuff and then was over on MVP. But that's not saying anything, right? There's no telling. Yeah. Like you said, it could just be cleaning out the closet, gonna get some new swag, make it look good. But it's definitely an interesting look. There's no telling one way or another.
Yeah. I know we both love Prez, and we're hoping he sticks around. He had a good year. He's really an unsung hero of the team. There was a lot of tournaments where, in my mind, after Paul Macbeth, he was our second best player for several events, and I think he struggled just a little bit with some consistency this year to crack into some of those lead cards and stuff. But he's another player who I think his trajectory is still up. He hasn't been playing disc golf his whole life like some of these other guys. He hasn't been touring for a lot of years, for like 10 years like Paul has. And I think as he continues to learn these courses, he still has a really high ceiling. So fingers crossed we keep him. I know he loves his green drone too, and I think he'd be lost without it. So.
Yeah. Okay, the last Discraft. Well, we've got two more Discraft names, but one we're going to spend a little bit more time on, and that's Vanessa Van Dyken. So Vanessa is in a contract year, and she's spending a lot of time. I think she's spending time in Michigan this year.
I think so.
Like she did last year. What are your thoughts about Vanessa?
Man, Vanessa's really a tough one. She kind of had a tough year after her hand injury. She was in that top 5 really consistently beginning of I think last year it was, and then had kind of injured and it was like recovering from that most of the year. And then 2020 obviously being a weird year. First off, I love Vanessa. I know I say this about everybody, but I love Vanessa. I love talking to her. She's so much fun. I feel like this is a toss-up for me for if she signs another deal with Discraft. I think it'd probably be another 1-year deal to keep her around, or if she explores some other options. This one's really tough for me, so I'm really torn on this one.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I think this and not that it actually has any direct correlation, but I think Haley King coming out so strong this year, and Vanessa having that injury that kind of slowed her down a bit. I'm not saying they're directly related, but if Discraft is out here and they're about to give a huge contract to somebody like Haley, that might mean there's a little bit less room for Vanessa, right? That again, there's no telling one way or another, but it's just something that's it's something to keep an eye on, really. As
and I know when Vanessa came to Discraft, she was really pumped to be one of the top women. I know that's something that she really strives to be, as a leader of a team. And now with Paige, Missy had a really, really great season. Haley obviously had her phenomenal season. It kind of moves her back a little bit in the power rankings on the team. So, to that effect, if she wants to be the best woman on the team, that could play into her looking around. But that one we'll kind of have to wait and see, I think.
Yeah, totally. So we're gonna roll through a few more. Coda Hatfield. Another one that we picked up this year. I think he was he had a lot of tournaments this year, I think, but he also had I think a health issue or an injury towards the beginning of the year, so I think that slowed him down on actually really breaking out. Dustin Keegan is another one who's in contract year. I don't know a whole lot about his situation. We mentioned Kyle Klein.
Talked about him.
And then Cameron Messerschmidt with Gateway is in a contract year. He's an interesting player because I think you said he toured with Haley at one point. So maybe
him and Haley toured around. He was I think he was the Circle 2 putting champ or leader the year last year.
Yeah.
So obviously he's a really good player, and he's a pretty young fella himself, so maybe an interesting name to watch. I don't know a whole lot about Cam, but maybe he kind of fits that Discmania mold of sort of young guys who make big putts. But we've said it a couple times. DD could kind of use some power on their roster too, so maybe that's a potential landing spot for him to get a little bit more support too.
Yeah, speaking of power on the roster, I think through the middle of the year, right when COVID kind of broke and we started getting tournaments back, this name had to have been the hottest name on everybody's tongues. Ezra Adderhold still does not have a big name sponsor. What are your thoughts on it?
He's gonna sign with somebody.
He has to, right?
Yeah, he's got to. He had too good of a season. He just won that tournament in Texas, the Belton, the Open at the Belton, whatever. I forget the name. Sorry.
Yeah.
But he just won that against some pretty good names. There was some people there, some ballers, especially some big Texas names there too, and he won that. So I think he has proven throughout the year that he has the game, he has the ceiling, and this was his first year on tour. And I've said it before, but I think there's so much value to learning these courses and understanding where the OBs are or where the lines are if you're out of position. And I really don't think you can duplicate the tournament experience. I think practice rounds are great. I think those bring value, but I think having that tournament experience and a full year of it now behind him, I think he's probably going to be, my dark horse guy to watch in 2021 for some of these big tournaments, because he's got the game, and I think it's just a matter of getting a little more experience. Where he goes, I think, is a big question mark. I can't imagine that everybody doesn't talk to him. I know
I think one of the things you said was his ceiling. He does have a massive ceiling. He's just he's a freak athlete, right? He's a pure athlete, and I think at one point I saw some rumor that he was in conversations with at least 2 companies that start with the letter D. There are currently three companies, major companies, that start with the letter D. What that means at the end of the day, nobody knows. But I think you're right. He's definitely one to watch, especially in this off season. He definitely has a personality that is going to bust out as a marketable personality. It's just a matter of maybe getting one bag of discs, right, is going to give him that consistency to rocket towards the top of the leaderboard, consistently make those top 10, top 5 finishes.
Yeah, he's got such a big game. I had watched some shots of his at that Texas tournament, and he's throwing these 550-foot Anheuser flex out shots. I mean, the dude's built like a freaking rock. Every team wants to slap their logo on his back. And so I think he shops around. I think he probably, whoever needs him the most and is willing to make him the best offer, I think is where he lands. Again, I know we've mentioned DD a couple of times, but I think, Discraft is still a big dog. I got to imagine that, they put an offer on the table, and I think Innova could really use another, possibly big name to add to their roster, because they typically have a pretty healthy roster of top tier guys, and so I could see that possibly happening as well.
Yeah, and I think it has to be said that Discmania kind of fits his mold too, right? Young guy, throws far, right?
Yeah.
6'3", 6'4", 6'5", and you throw
good
far.
Social media. Yeah. Just likable guy.
Yeah, and I mean, you put together a team of those main 4 being Simon, Eagle, Kyle, and Ezra, you're looking at something that's extremely strong. But enough about what is in the unknown. We have a few things that are known. They are factual. These contracts have been signed. Let's start with the 2 Finns. We have an announcement from Innova that they've re-signed a bunch of people. I think the 2 biggest names, in my opinion, of those people has to be the future of the women's sport, and that's Evelina and Henna. We didn't get to see them this year, but they
dominated when they were here. So beginning of the year, you'll remember they were both dominant when they were here. They were on lead cards. They were doing big things. And then COVID hit. They had to go back to Finland. I know I follow Evelina on social media, and she won a couple big tournaments over in Finland, so she's still doing big things. It comes as no surprise to me that Innova locks both these gals in. They're young, they're talented. Innova needs those strong women. When you look at Pierce, King, Kat, and Hokum being dispersed amongst the other companies,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it entirely makes sense for both of them that Innova gave them
Oh, definitely.
extensions.
I totally agree, and I love it for them. Like obviously we prefer them have Discraft on their back, but having both of them at Innova, kind of representing their side over there is really
It's a
really
great
cool.
rivalry. We
Oh
have
yeah,
we have Paige and we have Haley, and then they have Evelina and they have Henna, and so you really have these big four, really strong women, and we won't count Kristen Tatar out
yeah,
either from that conversation. But it's I feel like it's good to have a little bit of a rivalry. Like Discraft and Innova are kind of a little bit of a rivalry. They're both two big companies,
yeah,
and so I think it's kind of cool, and it makes for some good storylines this
yeah.
year with those guys.
I mean, give me a doubles match between Kristen and Rebecca, Haley and Paige, Katrina and Heather, and then
Yeah.
Evelina and Henna. I mean, that would be that would be a
Somebody get a
crazy
film
match.
crew.
Yeah, that'd be nuts. Okay, so moving back over to the men's side, on that same Innova announcement, they announced Nate, Greg, and Garrett are returning. I think Nate is probably that's a guarantee, right? I think Nate and Innova are kind of synonymous at this point. It's to the
Yeah.
grave.
Yeah, I think Nate's married in over there with the Firebird and how collectible those are and how notable those are. It was good to see them extend Greg another year. He's their world champion, their most current world champion. So good for them for securing in Greg. And Garrett, I figured Garrett would stick with Innova. I think he's probably another potential Innova lifer kind of guy. He has his deals with
Infinite.
Infinite, and Innova makes Infinite's plastic, so
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of married in two ways with them. And I'm a big Double G fan.
Yeah.
He's one of the nicest guys on tour. He's one of the most exciting guys to watch. He throws just insanely far, and if you've never seen him play in person, you absolutely need to. It's just astonishing what he can do with the disc. So, a little bit of me was like, man, Double G would really be cool to have under the Discraft umbrella and watch him throw a force 700 feet or something crazy. But it makes sense that he extended, and I think he extended for like 3 years with them.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
pretty long
Something
extension.
big.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go into two. Not let's do two Discraft people, and then we'll do the two probably biggest names on the whole list.
Yeah.
Andrew Fish got an extension. I think Andrew Fish had a really great showing this year. Was that MVP or GM's? I
Yes.
think it was MVP. Andrew Fish. I mean, it makes sense. He's a regional pro for the most part.
Yeah.
He's got a character on Twitter that he runs, and I think he's a good player, and it makes sense. I think Brody Smith is another really interesting after a tester year. That's what this was. That's all it
Yeah.
was, and I think he proved himself. Like I think he proved himself at the very least to be competitive, to be like valuable for the team.
Yeah.
And he signed on for another 2 years, I think.
Yeah. So, I had made a post about this that I was a doubter that Brody would get to 1,000 rated this year, and whenever our next update is, he's going to get there. I really thought 980s would be a good season for him. He's athletic, he has his golf background, so he understands some of the strategy. But I think disc golf is very different from that, and then obviously the mechanics are very different from Ultimate. So, I think he far exceeded my expectations, and I know I was a little bit of a critic of his, and I think he really proved all of the doubters wrong. That he is a force to be reckoned with. He's been doing really well down in Texas at the tournaments down there. I believe he was on the lead card the final day at that Open at Belton, and then he had I don't think he had a bad last round, and he kind of dropped a little bit. But to be in the mix with those guys that have decades more experience than him at a big tournament like that, I think proves that he can play there. And I think this offseason is he's really making the most of it. He's still being competitive. He's still getting that tournament experience, but it seems like he's also working on a lot of different skill sets. And so I think he's really going to be an interesting character in the 2021 season because he could pop on a lead card or a chase card here or there. I don't think that we'll see it consistently every tournament, but I think
Yeah.
he'll also be on a lot of feature cards because the man draws views.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean,
I think we'll see plenty of Brody in 2021, and I love that we that Discraft extended him for 2 years.
I think numbers are numbers. It makes sense. He's
Yep.
broken at least 3 websites with drops. It,
Yeah.
it it just makes sense for him to stick around. And I mean, like you said, he's really grinding it out. Texas at this time of year is the best place you can be playing disc golf, right? Because
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
so many of those local pros, those regional pros. I mean, he beat Emerson, right? He beat Emerson at a tournament. He's beat some of those bigger names down there in Texas. So it's really good to see him going out there, grinding, getting some wins sometimes, but also really focusing and pulling through tournaments and understanding that and focusing on the growth rather than just being a name in the sport.
Yeah, and his putting is extraordinary. Like he's posted videos of some of his practice putting, and his putt is really good. And one of the things that travels to every single course in the world is good putting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that he's really focused in on the value of putting. He's put the time in, and I think he's really become a very good putter, and I think that's going to really serve him well next year.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so we've got 2 more names on this list. I think they are for the extensions. They're some of the that makes sense names, but also we have to talk about them. That's Chris Dickerson and Eagle McMahon.
Yeah.
Chris got his extension coming off a USDC DGC championship. It makes sense, right? Him sticking with Prodigy. He's the name bearer. For the longest time it was Will, and then we thought it was going to be Kevin. Kevin came in, had some issues in that first year, but kind of focused up, brought himself back to relevancy. But Dickerson is just, I mean, he's the stalwart. He's going to be there forever.
Yeah, I see. I mean, he's from the South, and the Prodigy is a lot bigger down south than it is up here in the Midwest, and so I think he fits, their regional market really well. Obviously, he is a phenomenal player. I definitely put him in the top 5 for my power rankings. And anytime you have somebody that has as good a season as he had, you want to lock them up. So again, makes sense that Prodigy extended him. And the other name we had talked about was Eagle. I don't know that there was a lot of doubt that Discmania would keep Eagle around. He is definitely their best player. I mean, Simon is maybe their most, gets the most views with social media and all that because his YouTube is incredible. Follow him if you don't. But I think tournament-wise, Eagle was really their the golden child this year. And so again, when your best player is in a contract year, you sign them early and make it known that we're keeping this guy around.
Yeah.
There's no doubts about it, and it gives him some freedom this offseason to really focus and not have to stress or worry about a new deal or negotiating or any of that. So kudos to Discmania for keeping him around for 3 years, I believe it was.
Yeah. I mean, Eagle staying at Discmania is kind of a drop in the bucket at the end of the day because he's pretty much Discmania embodied at this point, and it's good to see him getting that contract. I think last year or the year before we started talking about how people are going to start getting these bigger contracts that make a lot more sense, make a lot more money. I think Eagle getting this one, and even to some extent Chris getting his, that's a reflection of exactly that. People are this is kind of the momentum shift in the sport where we're going to be starting to see some things that are really, really high value. And I mean, that's why some of the names higher on this list, talking about Haley, talking about James, talking about Kyle, that's why it's so interesting for them to be in a contract year this year.
Yeah, and this contract is such an interesting thing because Haley King could sign a 5-year deal, but let's say she goes and wins 5 world titles the next 5 years and maybe outgrows the value of that contract that today seems like a phenomenal out of this world deal. Or maybe somebody like Presnell signs like 1 year and he goes out and has a phenomenal year, and now next year disc golf has grown and he's more valuable next year And it can also go the other way too, where players get injured, and if they signed a short deal, they don't have that long-term security. So I think the discussion of contracts is super interesting in so many different facets. I know I love this time of year and having these discussions and seeing what happens, and I really hope that more players kind of follow what Paul did and release the terms of their contracts. I think every player gets a unique contract based on their needs and their strengths and weaknesses. But I kind of hope that we get to hear more of the numbers behind disc golf, because I think it's so interesting to see where disc golf is going, and as a fan, to see like how these players are valued.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll get it, but we can hope.
Yeah, we can only hope. Well, with all that said, we want to know what the people who are watching this video have to say. Did we miss anybody? Is there anybody out of contract right now? Or is there any points you wanted to make? Any other rumors that you know of? Let us know in the comments. Share, like, subscribe, all that same stuff. And at the end of the day, Wes, what do we got to do?
You got to make that putt.